Hey everyone, welcome to the program WRSA Radio. I am your host, G1. As always, I hope you are having a good week. Been a good one for me. Okay, I want to jump right into the show today because this one's kind of a doozy. I am a little pressed for time, so I'm trying to squeeze a lot into this show in kind of a short time. I didn't have a long time to prepare this material. A lot of stuff going on with work today. And some appointments later this afternoon. So I did, however, want the information to get out. It's important, and the specific events in question are topical, and they'll just likely be stale next week. So this is something to get in the front of you regardless of the time. So forgive me if I don't go into more depth on some of this, because it is something that, well, it brushes up against really a rather complex thing that we just can't really cover, in detail in 20 minutes. And that's kind of the downside of this format, or at least the way I've structured the show. I try to keep the show short so that I don't bore you to death just listening to me rattle off stuff. I'm kind of a one-man outfit, so I don't have the time to really pour a lot of effort into the visuals of this show. So I focus on the script and what I'm going to say more than what I'm going to put into the video. I know a lot of you just listen to the audio and don't really watch the video part, so that much. So that is what I try to focus on, and it's likely why the show has just kind of a very slow growth over the course of the whole time frame. So unfortunately, that just limits how much detail I can get into some of these topics. Anyway, let's get into this. So I'm going into something today that I think really is illustrative of the concept that I want to convey here, and that goes to the title of the show, Political Dog Paddle. For the record, I don't believe that most of you are still political paddlers. I think you're all aware of that things are not what they seem, and that the world we are dealing with is, like the ocean in its depths, and we only observe the surface. I do, however, think that maybe some of you might still be really only aware of the shallow water, maybe the littoral waters, as the technical term goes. So, you're swimming on your own, but maybe just snorkeling. You can kind of look down in there and understand there's more to it, but you're just not really adept at it. I don't know. I could be wrong. Maybe maybe I'm underestimating you guys, or maybe it's better that description fits the people that you know, or people that you are brush up against and are aware of, and so you can share this with them when we go into this. I know for certain that the vast majority of the people out there in this country are not aware of, nor do they care about, anything beyond that kind of shallow water. This is a problem that we face, and we do have to address it. At least I believe so. What needs to be understood by everyone is that the political ideology that we are accustomed to, or that we maybe think we fall into, only survives in that shallow water. Once you begin to really get below the surface, it melts away. And from that point on, it's totally about power, survival, and influence. Now, wealth provides access to all of that, so that's why I didn't really say wealth there, because it's just kind of implied. Wealth is encompassing of all of those things. Now, this concept can be really confusing and hard to get your head around, because there are times that seemingly ideological opponents will be seen to be working together or in collusion with one another in the background. And this leads people to throw around, terms like controlled opposition, and to scream out, psyop, or call people feds, all the time. This kind of stuff goes on. They are right to call attention to it. It's good when we recognize these things. And you're right to be very cautious of it, but it's not accurate necessarily to use those terms for everything, because it's not always applicable. Um, and it's really more complex than that and subtle than that, I think. Ideology is for the surface, from the perspective of these people who they're in the deeper water, and they see ideology as just for fools. Oh, look at them, they have no idea. And I think this mindset, though, is most exhibited by people who do not look behind them and they're themselves kind of unaware of how deep the water really gets and how dangerous the creatures are that are living there. Anyway, I'll try to drop the ocean metaphor as we go forward here, but I think it does kind of paint an accurate picture of things. It makes it easier to kind of visualize what we're talking about. This past weekend, there was a little march that took place in Florida. Altamont, Florida, I believe, was the city. At any rate, there was a small group called Blood Tribe who incidentally are over on Gab. If you are interested in seeing their posts, they have a presence, their social media presence there, and post things occasionally. They did a little protest march, hung some banner over a bridge on the highway, something like that. Looked to be maybe 30, 40 people, 40 guys mostly. Small thing. It didn't really get a lot of media coverage, which is fine, and really would have gone basically unnoticed, I think. But for, coincidentally, this just happened to be on a road that Laura Loomer happens to drive on when she goes to get her hair done. Now, if you don't know who Laura Loomer is, then good for you. You're not really missing anything from her. But basically, I can kind of sum her up in short. I think she is, I believe that she is a grifter political operative. She has a podcast. She kind of makes these rounds to some alternative conservative media outlets, media sites. I think she's maybe part of, one of these smaller media operations. At one point, she even ran for Congress in Florida and got trounced. She falls into that category that I think they're tryhards. They're kind of lightweights who, and it always seems to be females. They seem to want to get by on their looks, and unfortunately for her, her looks are just about as fake and plastic as her narrative. She claims to be a Trump supporter. Maybe she is. I don't know. But I'm going to tell you what I think she really is. I believe that she is largely irrelevant and mostly has a following of people who are, as the title of the show implies, political dog paddlers. Now, I debate on what to call her. I debated on what to call her. But going back to the metaphor, I settled on political swim diaper because I think she fills that role. She's here to keep the inexperienced from shitting up the water. Maybe lifeguard is a more dignified term, but I think swim diaper fits her a little bit more. At any rate, I think she's here to keep people from getting too radical. She's serving her purpose by warning you about these dangerous things that are out there when you even, think about joining a protest. In this case, what she's spent the last several days doing is, investigating a couple of the guys who were with this group who were protesting. She claims that she hasn't slept in 72 hours, whatever. See, these guys are evil, tatted up no-sees. You should be scared of them and not pay them any attention. You should not bother to ask what they're protesting because obviously it has to be bad and not something that you should be doing because of no-sees, right? Who wants to be associated with the no-sees, right? Don't look over there at those guys. Look how tattooed they are. They look like they've been in prison. Well, surprise, a couple of them have been in prison. Don't you worry, though, because Laura is on the case. She is exposing them. In fact, she posted today that one of them that she has just gotten a rage boner over actually called her directly and confessed to his crimes, just confirming everything that she's been saying about him. Now, folks, does that even remotely sound real to you? Does it sound plausible? It just seems so contrived and so fake and weird to me. Now, make no mistake, these guys are cringy, okay? I'm not going to try to sugarcoat that. They're not exactly putting out a very positive image, and they're not the kind of guys that I believe should be really out there as the face of a political movement, any political movement. I think everybody has their place and function in a movement, and maybe these guys are not the ones that you want being your leading spokespeople. Maybe they're the guys that stand to the side and function as security, you know? Hey, don't mess with us because our mean-looking, tatted-out guy will beat you up. You know, I mean, I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. Maybe not. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? But anyway, I have no idea what they were actually protesting or demonstrating about because I didn't really follow it that well. I'm sure that it is something that is called a conservative or right-wing idea or concept. That's what makes this look so fake to me. It looks very much like some of these guys were placed into this group to kind of be scarecrows, you know? They're out there to scare people away from these ideas and causes, and Laura Loomer is just the person to highlight this and paint it up for what it is. It gets her street cred and makes her look like she's, you know, looking out for you and keeping you safe. And in the meantime, it's still associating the ideas and concepts with people that the dog paddlers don't want to be around. And this is why optics still matter. And I know I struggle with that myself. I waffle back and forth on it. There are times that I think that it's too far gone and we can't worry about optics. We just need to get out there and get it done. I may have said that on the show before. I may have said, you know, we got to stop worrying about optics. And then I realized that we have way more people that are still just not paying attention and not aware of what is happening. Those dog paddlers out there. And I remember that we have to keep them in mind because we can't do this without some of them coming along for the ride. And I remember that this is a full spectrum conflict and it's playing out in the faces of all the people. It's, you know, just like it's playing out in the most remote, obscure internet chat rooms, it's in the face of those dog paddlers. And just like it's playing out on the battlefield in Ukraine. Which brings me back to one of these guys that Loomer is focusing on, the one who called her, or supposedly called her, because he happens to be a guy who claims to have been sent to fight in the Ukraine by the CIA. And Loomer is actually building maybe a good argument for that to be true. Maybe it is. Which kind of makes you ask some questions, or at least it should make you ask some questions, because things don't seem to be really adding up and making a whole lot of sense. Loomer's trying to paint the picture that this whole blood tribe thing is, you know, oh, it's a deep state fed op by putting a light on this guy. And what she's actually doing, however, at least I think, is giving you more a glaring example of what I was talking about, that ideology is really only surface deep. Because the leadership in Ukraine is Jewish. Zelensky is Jewish, or some of his key advisors are Jewish. So it's at least, you know, who have Jewish people in positions of influence. This has always been a very odd thing about this conflict, and something that doesn't quite really ring true if you only look at that surface narrative, because clearly the Ukrainian military has within it a number of organizations that are rooted in what you would call nationalist ideologies, which I don't have an issue with whatsoever. They're Ukrainian nationalists. That's fine. But it also has organizations that have ideologies that, you know, tie back to Nazis, real Nazis. And I'm talking about those real ones back all the way back into World War II, not the fake ones that we have today. Many of these units in Ukraine are aligned with Bandera, who was a Ukrainian leader that served with and aligned with the Germans in Ukraine. And he's accused of committing war crimes and atrocities, of course. I don't know if that is true. I have not dug into that aspect of that history. I know general things about that, those kinds of local operations that took place during the war, but I don't know Bandera specifically beyond just his name. So I don't know if it's true. I just don't care enough about that to make the effort to put into it. But again, that is the surface narrative, and that's the point here. On the surface, these guys like Azov and Right Sector in Ukraine that are supposedly the Banderites, they would not seem to be the kind of people that the Ukrainian leadership would want to be representing them. They are the very people that the Russians have used as part of their justification for the special military operation, this denazification that the Russians have talked about. It would seem that Ukraine would want to obscure that and minimize it and not draw attention to those kinds of elements within their military, but they don't do that. Maybe they would try to take it away from the Russians and say, see, this is not a problem. This is just an excuse that you're making to justify your actions. But the Jewish leadership, or at least the Jewish leaders that have influence in Ukraine, they don't do that. Well, why is that? In point of fact, the Azov group was originally financed into existence by a Ukrainian millionaire that is, as far as I know, Jewish. Now, we have one of those very same Azov guys who looks to be a guy that very well could have been sent to the Ukraine by U.S. intelligence, who shows up here and becomes part of this so-called right-wing organization, Blood Tribe. And that organization and this guy is called out by Loomer, who is also Jewish. And this guy specifically is brought to light as an example of, well, the CIA are backing the Nazis over there in Ukraine. Just to make it more crazy, Loomer reports that these guys were chanting Slava Ukraina at their protest. But the right wing in America is supposed to be opposed to Ukraine fighting the Russians and not supporting Ukraine. We're supposed to be supporting Putin. Isn't that how that works? How is this making any sense? It doesn't. It's all very interesting, though, that this all surfaces at the same time that Elon Musk goes after the ADL. The ADL, Anti-Defamation League, is a shakedown operation, pure and simple, in my opinion, in Minecraft. They exist much like Jesse Jackson's old Rainbow Coalition did, to extort money from anyone they can bully into submission by labeling them as a racist. Jesse Jackson, of course, learned this from the ADL, and his organization would do that very same thing. They would go into corporate America and just demand donations, or they would dig up ways to boycott and impact this target company or corporation on racial accusations. And the ADL focuses more on speech. Rainbow Coalition would go and say, well, you don't have enough black people in your board or in your management, or you're discriminating hiring practices, blah blah blah, whatever. They would bring that out and say they were going to throw those accusations out against companies unless they would make a public donation to the Rainbow Coalition. And then suddenly all that would go away. The ADL kind of focuses more on speech and marketing, but it's the same MO, okay? Over the last year or so, since Musk took over Twitter, the ADL has been relentlessly attacking them to curb any speech that the ADL deems to be hate speech. But of course the ADL considers anything that is critical of Jewish people or anything critical of a political idea that the ADL supports as being hate speech. So being critical of abortion, for example, or transgenderism is, according to the ADL, anti-Semitic. And Musk has been resisting this. And so the ADL went after the advertisers on Twitter and said, hey, you need to stop advertising with Twitter because they're racist over there. They don't suppress speech according to our code. Musk says that X, as the new name of Twitter, has seen a significant decline in advertising revenue since the ADL launched this campaign. And I think Musk has an extremely solid case here, as this is out and out extortion and intimidation. It's clear. But we shall see how that goes in court if they file a lawsuit, as he says they will. I just found it odd timing that these two seemingly disconnected things took place at the same time. Maybe they are not connected. It's just coincidental. I don't know. But what it says to me is that deeper currents may be at play here. We need to be cautious that this is not an effort to kind of shape the battlefield and prepare the way for something that is moving, down in the deep. Different factions are maybe it's different factions trying to get out ahead of something that they know is coming. I don't know. What it is evidence for, in my opinion, is that those factions are at work in the deeper waters. And that work is without ideology. They have an agenda, and they will use any and all who will further that agenda, but they don't conform to that simple political spectrum that we all think about. This is far more complex than that. Now, there are multiple factions. It's not all one group of people, if you got that impression. There are multiple agendas, and those agendas are very ancient. At least I believe they are. They have evolved over centuries of time, but they're there, and they're far more motivating than the simple political party labels and platform planks and all of this crap that you see that is packaged and wrapped up for everyday consumption. I don't think necessarily that some of those agendas are evil either, or completely evil, if there's such a thing. I think that some of these factions are basically looking out for the betterment of humanity, but in order to remain concealed, they have to allow some things to happen. In other words, they can't necessarily move in certain ways. There's some constraints there because they don't want to reveal their hand. And that's hard to understand, I think, for some people, and hard to get your head around. But I think that's how they see it, at least. Maybe it's not right, but sometimes the truth can be so dangerous that people decide that keeping it concealed is far less destructive. In other words, if this were to be revealed, it would destroy everything, and millions would possibly be affected or suffer because of it, as opposed to if it is concealed, then maybe only hundreds suffer, if that makes any sense. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I think that is the nature of things. And I could be all wrong about all of that. Let me know what you think in the comments. That is all I have time for today. Like and subscribe. Come see us over on Gab and the Mothership, and I will see you on the next episode.